There we go.
Here are the letters the Romans gave us. And here are the
I
countries.
also don't think I'm screen sharing. Wow. I'm not screen sharing because it would have a little icon at the bottom. I'm sorry. We'll get there at some point.
Whose languages derive from Latin. Today they cover half the world. As for the ancient Romans, the boundaries of their state encompassed their entire civilization. The Roman peace, or Pax Romana, serves as the first example of globalization. Let's take a walk across 12 centuries of the Roman history. And yes, those numerals are also a Roman legacy. What is Rome? A city on 7 hills, capital of Italy. But that is today. 2,000 years ago, there it is. Another 1,000 years ago, there. A tiny tribal settlement of the Latins by the river Tiber. How did this manage to conquer the world? First, it was lucky with its neighbors. To the north, the Etruscans of modern Tuscany, a mysterious people whose language has never been fully deciphered. To the south, Greek colonies. These peoples all traded with each other. It was at the crossroads of their trade routes that Rome appeared. From the very start, Rome has been an open city, a safe haven for outcasts, murderers, runaway slaves. Rome offered migrants a unique opportunity to become fully fledged citizens. This will make Rome the largest metropolitan city of the ancient world. The Romans themselves believed they were descendants of refugees from the Middle East who had survived the Trojan War. Romulus and Remus were the great-grandchildren of the Trojan hero Aeneas. Nursed by an Italian she-wolf, the brothers quarreled where to site the future world capital. Romulus killed Remus, gave his name to the city, and became its first ruler. As legend has it, there were 7 kings, each of which enjoyed a lengthy reign and left some beneficial legacy. A calendar, a sewer system, or the Capitolium, a temple to the senior god Jupiter. Much of what the Romans later became famous for, aqueducts, bridges, perhaps even the gladiatorial games, were borrowed from the Etruscans. This people had invented the Latin alphabet by adapting the Greek letters for their own needs. It's not surprising that their last kings were Etruscan. Rome borrowed her military and government organization from them. Well,
I was hanging out there. The last kings of Rome before like emperors were Etruscan kings. And we will talk about that a little bit more today.
Maintaining her stern, patriarchal simplicity. In 509, Rome was shaken by a sex scandal. The son of King Tarquin the Proud raped the chaste Lucretia. Tarquin was expelled, making him the last king of Rome. The Romans decided to prevent any such concentration of power ever again. From 509 onwards, they elected 2 consuls to serve a year of peace instead of a monarch. The consuls were controlled by the Senate. This consisted of 300 fathers, patres in Latin, hence the term patricians. Those not so lucky.
The patricians are also usually older members of society with a lot of wealth. Yeah. Old dudes. A lot of money. Sounds similar to something. But...
to be born into the right families, joined the plebs. Even if they were as rich as patricians, they were not entitled to take up positions in the state. It is in the 200-year struggle for these rights that the Republic literally...
The plebeians, regular people, angry. No say in government. Angry.
Meaning Republic thing will be formed. The plebeians would make up the backbone of the army, and to have their own way, they would threaten the fledgling state with emigration to a neighboring hill. Each time, the scared patricians caved in, introducing, for instance, the special position of a representative, or tribune of the plebeians. These had the right to veto any decisions of the consuls. One of the main achievements of the struggle was the publication of the first written laws. By 287 BC, the plebeians had achieved complete equality of rights with the patricians. The unity of Rome found its best expression in the formula Senatus Populusque Romans, the Senate and the Roman people, which still adorns the manhole covers in Rome. In 390 BC, the history of Rome could have come to an end. The city was unexpectedly taken by the dogs. The guard dogs had sensed no danger, for which they would be crucified every year since. Geese are one of the last protectors of the capital island.
Yeah, that one's a fun one. It's so random. The dogs didn't tell us that we were being invaded, so we're gonna crucify them every single year.
Fortress instead, saving Rome from complete destruction. The shaken Romans conducted a military reform. The Roman legion was divided into manipuli, making it more mobile in battle. The Roman army spent the next 100 years in constant wars. Instead of simply imposing a tribute on the conquered, the Romans would enter into a treaty of alliance with them, and the loyal allies would supply Rome with a never-ending stream of recruits. Thanks to this, the Roman legions were able to stand their ground in battle with the most efficient fighting force of the time, the all-conquering Macedonian phalanx, led by Pyrrhus, a relative of Alexander the Great. The last stronghold of resistance in Italy, the Greek city of Tarentum, then hired the most costly and celebrated contemporary warlord of the time to defend against Roman expansion. Having conquered Tarentum and Mid-Sicily, Rome now had to take on a much more dangerous adversary, Carthage, lord of the Mediterranean. The Romans called the Phoenicians of Carthage Punics, hence the Punic Wars. They fought for the next 100 years.
And they really did use elephants. Yeah.
In 149 BC, Rome had taken the greater part of Punic territory and that of their allies, but after each defeat, the trading power of Carthage would rapidly recover. Senator Cato the Elder began to finish every speech with the same refrain: Carthage must be destroyed, and so it was done. The city was wiped out, all of its population was enslaved, allegedly plowing salt into the air as an eternal curse. Also in 146 BC, the Romans wiped out another city, Corinth, making Greece and Macedonia Roman provinces. Rome appropriated the colossal riches of the disintegrating empire of Alexander, but the patriarchal simplicity of Rome succumbed to the sophisticated Greek culture. Greek became, in effect, a second state language. The Roman nobility busied itself learning new words, hexameter, history, rhetoric. Cicero, the most famed orator of Rome, would come to model his speeches on those of the Greek Demosthenes. However, across this immense territory, full rights were only afforded to the Romans themselves. Even other Italians, the majority of the military, had no citizenship rights. These would demand equality, declare war, and win the right to take part in managing the state. This was a total game changer. While ancient Greece remained a collection of squabbling city-states, Rome gradually extended citizenship rights to the conquered, laying down the basis for an empire. Having conquered half the world, Rome fell victim to globalization. Cheap grain and an inflow of unpaid slave labor bankrupted the small farmers. These rushed into the cities and joined the ranks of the proletariat, those who have nothing to lose except their own offspring. At the same
also love all this culture.
time, the rich grew 100 times richer, having bought land from the ruined peasants for a song. Previously united, the Senate.
So peasants go broke, market crashes, rich people get richer. Something's gonna get done to stop it.
And the Roman people split into two hostile camps. The tribunes of the people, the Gracchi brothers, would try to reconcile them. They proposed granting excess public lands to the impoverished peasants and suggested free distributions of bread to the poor. The disgruntled senators decided to suppress the Gracchi movement by force, killing the brothers and several thousand of their allies.
That's going to be a common theme. If at any point the senators, or more specifically the army, doesn't agree with whatever the ruler's doing, they're just going to kill him. And like I said, it's usually the army that does it, more often than not.
Rome was gripped by civil wars. Social mobility for the proletariat was offered by Gaius Marius.
Civil wars happen a lot too.
A popular general, he began enrolling the proletariat into the army with the promise of a grant of land at the end of service. This would make the legions personally devoted to their generals. In 49 BC, two outstanding generals fought over Rome. Cneius Pompeius had won the eastern provinces for Rome, including restless Judea, cleared the Mediterranean of piracy, defeated Sparta's slave revolt, and justifiably added the title Great to his name. Gaius Julius Caesar had conquered Gaul. Nowadays, they would call it genocide. He butchered 1 million Gauls and enslaved as many more. He went on to defeat the Germans and then invaded Britain. According to the law, a general had to dismiss his legions before returning to Rome, and in return have his moment of glory.
It was so that there wouldn't be like a threatening army in behind you to take over the government. So they weren't allowed to have their army behind them or their legions when they're coming into the city.
Triumphal entry into the capital to the applause of the citizens. Caesar performed a hitherto unseen maneuver. He refused to submit to the Senate, and having crossed the Italian border, the river Rubicon, marched his legions to Rome. It would take him several years to defeat Pompey the Great and his other rivals, pitting Roman legions against each other. In the process, Caesar annexed new territories and gave Cleopatra the Egyptian throne. After a romantic cruise along the Nile, she would give birth to Caesarion, or Little Caesar. On his return, Caesar would add Imperator, or Emperor, to his name, title originally meaning victorious commander.
So he effectively took over Rome.
And gained control of all political positions: consul, tribune of the people, and dictator. Rumor spread that Caesar wanted to declare himself king. Conspiracy was brewing in the Senate, and Caesar was assassinated. Caesar left his wealth, quite unexpectedly for all concerned, to his grandnephew, 19-year-old Gaius Octavius. This Octavian immediately joined in the power struggle. In 31 BC, he defeated his last rival, the warlord Mark Antony, who likewise had an affair with Cleopatra. The lovers would take their own lives. Octavian was left sole ruler of the vast territory. Julius Caesar ruled for 4 years. Octavian, assuming the title Augustus, meaning the Venerable or the Great, ruled for an endless 43 years. He didn't formally abolish the Republic, he simply took control.
And then like my question is, he wouldn't have been able to do that if it wasn't for Caesar leaving everything in.
Yeah.
So, is it impressive? Yes, he's like the few of this Roman Empire history that actually managed to rule for that long. Most don't live that long. There's one other one that we'll talk about later that ruled longer. One. So it is impressive.
Of all possible positions, making his power almost absolute. But he modestly called himself Princeps, the first senator. And even though skirmishes with barbarians continued along the borders, inside them, the period of Pax Romana set in, a period of peace and stability that was to last 200 years. The empire experienced an economic upswing. Bread was distributed for free to 200,000.
So yeah, big economic boom during his reign too, which kind of aids to him being able to rule for 43 years. But yeah, we're going to stop that there today because that's pretty much what we're covering today, is that particular chunk of history. And then we'll pick back up with the rest of it later. But yeah, today we're focusing on early Rome and then the peak of the Roman Empire, which is around when Augustus takes over. You already have some introduction into Rome with the Etruscans. Early Roman art was kind of favoring what they did. But then, of course, whenever Rome conquers Greece, a lot changes. In 409 BCE, Rome finally overtakes the Etruscans and they establish that republican government. made up of the Senate consuls and occasionally a dictator, but dictator in the sense of like not dictator, but a general who was leading the army. And they only usually did that during war times as last minute measures for things. We associate the word dictator with bad stuff. But I mean, effectively, Julius Caesar was a dictator too. So. But yeah, and patricians, or those old rich dudes, made up the bulk of the leaders in society. Later on, plebeians were added. Plebeians were more like your regular folks that were generals in the army, which does lead to issues later. Like I mentioned, the army does assassinate a lot of emperors because the army trusts their generals and they tend to follow what they say. Yeah. Early architecture favors Greeks quite a bit after Marcellus brought back all of the spoils from Greece and told tales of what he saw there. The Romans started to incorporate or infuse the Greek art and architecture into Etruscan styles that already existed. So early Rome, just to sum it up really short, is a fusion of Etruscan and Greek style together. Not that Etruscan isn't Greek, because it's already kind of Greek-ish, as we learned last week. But here is the Temple of Portunus, which is an example of early Roman architecture dedicated to Portunus, the god of harbors, in case you are curious, because I like to know those things. But it's not super important. But it's a wonderful example of Etruscan and Greek architecture combined. Normal Greek temple style, you would have access from all angles into the temple. You would have your outer layer of columns and then your inner temple of columns as well. Here you just have a porch area, and then you have some embossed or inlaid columns on the sides rather than a whole exterior porch area like the Greeks did. This, however, was something the Etruscans did, where you didn't have a whole entire colonnade along the outer edge, but just the building itself as a temple. Of course, you just walk up. It's an axial floor plan, meaning it's straight. You don't have to go around anything. They borrowed Ionic columns, and they switched up the frieze. Normally, this would be decorated in reliefs. I'm sure you remember. They didn't do that a lot in Rome. So once again, changing it up a bit. Same with the pediment. No relief sculpture in there either. And instead of marble, because for whatever reason, Rome didn't realize they had a ton of marble early on. It took them a while to realize that they had a lot of marble. So beforehand, what they would do to try and emulate Greek marble is use stucco. So yeah, a lot of early Roman temples and buildings use stucco in ways to make it look like marble, which is cheap, but yeah. Trying to be Greek, but also sticking to their roots there. One Temple of Vesta. I cannot believe I used a stock photo. I must not have noticed. I like made specifically sure that I wasn't using stock photos, so I must not have noticed it. I'll have to change it because I don't like those. Huh? It's a nice picture, but I tried really hard not to use a stock image. Yet another example of Greek and Etruscan styles combined here at the Temple of Vesta. There's a question mark there because we aren't sure if it's for Vesta or not. But it is designed in the Greek tholos style. If you remember from last week, a tholos is just a round temple. And they used the Greek Corinthian columns. However, instead of having stairs all the way around like a normal Greek temple, once again, they just had the stairs on the entrance side of the temple in one area, which tends to be a more Etruscan design element. The reason why we consider it to be a temple of Vesta, which I added in there about at the bottom there, is because most of Vesta's temples are round, which is why they make that assumption. They did build this building with concrete. Most Roman buildings are done in concrete. Concrete allows for more complex shapes to be created because you can make a mold and then fill it with concrete and then just make your architectural piece. Rather than chiseling out marble or stone. It's a lot easier, faster, and cheaper process. So with Rome, just trying to create a differentiation between Greece, you're going to see more complex architecture thanks to concrete. Another example, which I don't have the title on for whatever reason, but this is the restored view of the sanctuary of Fortuna. I think I might not have, I don't know. I might not have meant to leave it in here. This is another building, though, that was only made possible with concrete, just to hit home the idea that they were able to do more unique structures because of concrete molds. Like this half circle. Here, here, and here, the arches, the arcades, the vaulting, the thin columns, the ramps leading up, all thanks to concrete. And this is dedicated to the gods of fortune. Fortuna kind of makes sense. Once again, concrete revolutionizes architecture for centuries to come. Rome invents it. They really do showcase its abilities as well. It leads to the inventions and uses of things like barrel vaults. This is a barrel vault, groin vaults, and hemispherical domes. There's the images of each one in case you don't know what it looks like. Your groin vault is just two arches intersecting across each other to create that. This is very prominently used in Islamic architecture and Gothic. We're going to mostly see in this particular section your barrel vaults and your domes, as the Romans are very proud of their domes. Now, enough for early Roman architecture and how it combines Etruscan styles with Greek. Now we're going to move on to early Roman sculpture and how it does that. This is going to be a very repetitive section, by the way. Sculpture's a little bit different, though. They did steal the idea of realism from the Greeks. However, you know how the Greeks idealized human forms for a really long time until the Hellenistic era? The Romans don't do that except for a couple of brief moments, like during Augustus's reign. For the most part, they show people how they actually look, which you can kind of see here with a man with a portrait of his ancestors. So here's the man and his two previously alive ancestors. This is supposedly what it looks like. These were found in pieces. Those might not be his ancestors. But hey, you can tell each one of them has individualized characteristics going on. This dude has wrinkles. The Greeks wouldn't normally in high classical period show wrinkles or age or baldness. That's not normal. There was one day, literally when I was working on this, someone sent me a link to a page. There was a person that recreated what every single one of the emperors of Rome looked like based off of their statues. So the statues are like individual enough to be able to pick out what these people probably did look like, except for like like I said, during Augustus's reign, Augustus wanted to be shown as an idealized godlike figure, so he doesn't count. But yeah, this is a funny little thing that the Romans did. So whenever someone died, this is really weird. It's weird. There would be like a parade of all of the dead people's busts with your body as it's being carried. Well, not your body because they cremated things, but like with your like cremated remains being carried to the mausoleum. Just a parade. In every generation, the next group would be added to that parade. So this is a portrait of a senator. He was very prideful of his ancestors. This was not normal for all people to do, by the way. It was like rich people that could afford portrait busts. But yeah, he was proud of his ancestry and had portraits made of him with his favorite ancestors that would probably have been used or referenced from the funeral procession bus. Yes, it's a fun, weird thing that they did. Here's another one, Verism. The men and occasionally women would want to be shown as older. That goes back to government. Do you guys remember the main people in charge in government? Old people. Woo-hoo. So one of the few cases in history when elderly are respected and well liked. So this is just one of those examples. This is a very dramatic example of men and women who would want to be shown as older, wiser, respectable members of society. This dude has a lot of wrinkles and they're very realistic looking. Like you can imagine the feel of his crepey skin. At least I can. And another one, this is Trivoli General. This is a really fun example of combining Roman ideals with Greek ideals. So here you have the head of a really old man that has been put onto a Greek copy of a sculpture. Yeah, they're trying. So they're trying to incorporate Greek styles as much as possible. They like it, they see the value in it, but they're also trying to stay Rome. And this is the monstrosity that was created because of it. So the Romans often, when they were making their portrait busts, only really constructed the head, and then the body as a whole was just mass manufactured and the head would be added to it. Usually copies of Greek whole body portraits like we looked at last week. Yeah, so that's the reason why this dude has a really muscular body and an old man's head. Yeah, he does. His facial expression looks like he's either angry or in pain. Yeah. Yeah, you could get it like that. Yes. It's during the Roman Empire. We'll notice this a few times going forward that they start like having warehouses that just make these things. Like you make that same thing over and over again. You get really good at it, but yeah. And occasionally your patron would ask you to throw in something specifically you, like this guy said. You'll notice it later when we talk about sarcophagi. They were mass produced. Coins also come about in this time period. Well, I mean, coins already existed prior, but it's around this time, specifically with Julius Caesar, because he's the first one to do this, that we see coins that show images of rulers. Prior to Caesar, they showed images of gods, goddesses, like important figures in history. Well, I mean, Julius Caesar is important, but like he was alive then. So during his reign, he had coins minted of himself. After this, all of the other emperors will follow suit and have coins made of themselves to be used during their reign. And this is a denarius coin with Julius Caesar's profile portrait. And he is shown as an older man with a receding hairline on purpose, because once again, they respected their elderly. But if you remember, Octavius takes over after Caesar's reign, and Octavius changes his name to Augustus, and he's the Emperor Augustus, and Augustus likes idealized figures. So this is going to change. I'm hungry. I shouldn't be hungry. Oh well. Some more stuff from this era. This is a funerary relief. I wasn't going to include this, but I thought it was interesting. So in Roman culture, they had slavery, but you could purchase your freedom as a slave, or your owner could like relinquish you as a slave and free you. And the people that were freed from slavery usually wanted to honor their former masters in some way. It was traditional for them to take their master's name. So here we have Gessi, Gessi, and Gessi. The master is in the center. His name was Gessi. And the female and male slave both took his name, Gessi. Yeah, it's pretty normal. And like I said, they like to honor their masters not only by taking their name, but also by donating things like this to their funerals, just to honor them. Kind of an interesting thing. Like, I don't know. If I was a slave, I probably wouldn't want to honor my master, even if they did free me, because I was still a slave. But hey. It was traditional for the slaves to earn their freedom, and then they themselves would also purchase slaves and eventually free them. Yeah, it's weird to think. It worked really well for them, because how it worked was a like mentorship society. So Gessi ended up being a patron for the freed slave Gessis. This is confusing because they all have the same name. But he ends up becoming their patron and taking care of them and guiding them and giving them advice. And then they in turn would purchase slaves when they had money and eventually free them and become their patrons, and then it just carried on throughout.
Basically like your parents.
Yeah. Except for your working people as slaves. I mean, you can work your kids as slaves. Apprenticeship, yeah, it's kind of like an apprenticeship kind of idea, because that's pretty much how that works. And apprentices in the olden days wouldn't make money. They would literally be completely reliant upon the master they were learning from. So it's kind of interesting to think about, which is why I added it in, because I thought it was interesting. I wasn't going to. It was in one of your little snippets on a different area in your book. But yeah, eventually Pompeii happens. I told you we'd get to Pompeii today. Pompeii, part of the Roman Empire at this point in history. On August 24th, 79 CE, Mount Vesuvius erupted, burying Pompeii under several feet and yards of soot and ash. Many died, including Pliny the Elder, our art historian, the very first art historian. It is said that he died trying to save other people and get them on boats, trying to usher people onto boats, and he ended up dying from smoke inhalation. So yeah, bad. Good guy though. He gives us all of our first examples of art history and tried to save people in the last moments of his life. His son wrote a bunch of books about him, which is how we know about him today. But yeah, Pompeii at its peak had about 20,000 inhabitants. They died during the eruption. It's a lot of people. But because of that, we do have a large amount of art and artifacts left behind. Positive and negative? I don't know. we're going to focus on the positives today. Beginning with the architecture that's left behind from Pompeii, we do have the city center, which is the Forum. This is a typical Roman city design. Normally at the very center of your city, you will have your Forum, which is a large meeting area. It eventually ends up becoming more familiarly known as a basilica, which evolves into a church later on. But your Forum is where a lot of your government offices would be housed. Off to the side is your basilica, where a lot of the administration's done, and then the temple. So here we have the Temple of Jupiter, the Forum, the Basilica, all smack dab in the center of the city. And as you can see, there is a good chunk of it left behind. Of course, this took a lot of excavating to get it. Okay, yeah, yards of dirt. Some more architecture. They did have a double theater. So if you remember when we talked about Greece, they had a like half circle or semicircle theater. You would have your stage on one end and all of your seating on one side. Now, in Rome, they did something called a double theater, which is two semicircles put together. In the center would be your stage where the acts took place, and then around is seating for the masses. This one did seat 20,000 people, so everyone could go if they wanted to. Of course, Rome had a much different purpose for their theaters than Greece. The Greeks did use their theater for plays, music, poetry, concerts. The Romans used their amphitheater for gladiatorial fights and animal baiting and animal hunting. They would occasionally host plays and musical concerts, but more often than not, the thing that really drew in the masses were the gladiator fights, which I have mixed feelings about. But yeah. This was only possible thanks to concrete. So thanks to the concrete, they were able to, instead of really like the Greeks just chiseled out sides of mountains to do this, the Romans were able to build arcades, so rows of arches, to allow for entrances into the theater in multiple areas and exits out of it, seating for everyone. The wealthier families were given canopy seating. There were certain areas that had a canopy overlooking, so you were shaded. The regular people would not have that opportunity. You'd be out in the sun. And also the areas underneath the theater that allowed for the animals to be stored and gladiators to hang out until they fought. Thank you, concrete. Now, some more architecture, the House of Venti, or Vetti, sorry, Venti. I mentioned I was hungry. Vetti. The House of Vetti was designed by the Vetti brothers, who were a family of merchants. They made their money through merchants. They were kind of like new rich. And they decided to build a house to kind of show off their new wealth from being merchants. In 79 CE, their original house was rebuilt after an earthquake. I know Pompeii went through an earthquake and then a volcanic eruption. Yeah. The earthquake probably was like well, I mean, it happened like 30 years prior. But yeah. Talk about bad luck. It reminds me of that like scene from Hercules. Like first there were the floods, and then the locusts, and then the earthquake. Yeah, you guys know. It reminds me of that. 2020 and 2021 remind me of that too, though. But yeah, this is typical design for a Pompeii house and later, well, really any wealthy Roman house. They would have an atrium to welcome guests and their patrons or like former slaves to give them advice. That would be your entryway, that atrium, which was open air, and it usually had a skylight like this one and a fountain in the center. Usually there'd be reliefs and paintings all around the wall. And the atrium would look out onto a second open air area, the garden, which is what you see here. So here we have the atrium looking out into the garden, and then surrounding the garden and atrium would be your rooms for your house. It was all centrally planned on, well, I can draw it. You guys are all here. I don't have to worry about online people. So, atrium, garden, rooms, front door. Walk in, there's your atrium. You can see through to your garden thanks to the open airways. And then all of your rooms would be designed around that. See, it makes sense when I draw it out. In my head, it made sense too. The Pompeii people, well, the wealthy families of Pompeii decked out almost all of their interior with frescoes and mosaic designs. So thanks once again to Mount Vesuvius. We do have a lot of paintings. This goes to that question from your test, which tells you to select a style. There are 4 styles of Pompeii paintings, and it doesn't just apply to Pompeii. The rest of Rome also follows these trends. It's just called the Pompeii styles because we have them. They're the Pompeii. But yeah, they're all true frescoes, meaning buon frescoes, wet fresco, meaning that chemical reaction between the lime plaster and the paint takes place to adhere it to the wall permanently. And it was Auguste Mau, an art historian, that ends up dividing these into 4 styles, but the 4 styles do work. Sometimes when our historians do things, they want to do it and fit it into a specific mold to make it make sense. These styles actually make sense. It's like an evolution from style to style. Beginning with the first style, which is a masonry style, I've kind of already mentioned that. They use stucco to recreate marble. That's the first style. Trying to make something look expensive when it's not. Like today, I'm thinking of my parents' house. My parents' house has tile flooring, but it's faux wood tile. Yeah, like that. Yep. Or like a laminate. Laminate flooring likes to mimic wood. It's cheaper. That's how this stucco was. It was cheaper than marble, but it could make it look close enough to marble to fool the eye. That's the first style. Second style uses that marble idea, but they add on to it by trying to make your living space look like it continues on into the wall. That'll make more sense when we look at it in a second. So fooling the eye, trying to give depth and dimension to a painting. The third style was a very large break. It was a very monochromatic style with an itty bitty painting in the center. And the fourth style combines all of them to create an area that kind of looks like an art gallery. It's also a bit chaotic looking. But yeah, these all make sense, and you can pick whichever one you like the most and discuss it for that question. So first style, like I said, recreating marble. This does not look like super marbly anymore, but it's really old. This is from the 2nd century BCE. These panels are supposed to look like different kinds of marble with stucco. That's the first style. Recreating things that are expensive at a low cost. I feel like this one we can probably grasp pretty easily, even if we don't have a good picture of it. Because people still do it today. You're good. I don't care, you're good. Now, if you choose to write about this one, going to be very short. The second style, like I said, is trying to create the illusion of continuing space in that room. So they still use the faux marble idea, which you can kind of see at the top band here. They tried to make it look like marble, so they're still combining that first style with the second style, but they tried to make the room look like it continued on into another area, which is what this scene from the Villa of Mysteries does. The image itself shows, well, possibly rights to entering into the cult of Dionysus. Yes, a cult. Not even joking, it's a cult. It was unofficial religion at the time, very popular for women to join. But in this image, the rites of the young women are happening. They're uniting in marriage with the god Dionysus, and sexual acts are performed on the other walls with Dionysus. Yes. There's also a whip happening in here, so right here. So yeah, it's a cult. But yeah, it's an interesting one, and it's kind of a fun one, but it's also really good at illustrating that second style of trying to make the room appear like it goes on past. So we have more space, there's columns back here, trying to give you the idea that the room continues. They used perspective. I know, perspective. Who knew ancient Romans had it? But they learned from the Greeks. The Greeks themselves also had perspective. We talked about that last week. But they used 1-point linear perspective to once again make things look realistic and three-dimensional on a flat surface. And this is really big, it's 5 feet tall, so it would have taken up the entire wall of that space. And in case you're wondering, this is not the whole thing. There's also areas below that for like the floor and another band of that fake marble below, but I couldn't get it all to fit. Some more second style to give you some more examples of second style. Once again, alluding to an extended space. Here we have a tholos being represented with an opened pediment and some ionic columns here. Well, not really true ionic columns. Those are Roman ionic columns. And then a little fountain and garden. Once again, using 1-point linear perspective. Some more second style. Not only did they show landscape in second style, well, not landscape like landscape, but like building architectural landscape. They showed plans. So this would depict, well, it's a fresco depicting what like the actual wildlife of Pompeii was like on the coast. So you have olive trees, and this one, instead of linear perspective, they used atmospheric perspective, meaning the further away the images are, the blurrier they are. So the close-up trees are quite literally, you can see them. The further away ones are much, much blurrier. So yeah, once again, trying to make things look like they continue on into space. And yes, most art historians for a very long time believed that ancient cultures just didn't know atmospheric or linear perspective. So it wasn't until they uncovered things like this that we realized they did. And we were wrong. Third style, like I mentioned, large walls of monochromatic color with an itty bitty painting in the center. Third style is very different. Oddly enough, though, with these itty bitty teeny tiny painting, it's usually a landscape or architectural scene, and it does use linear perspective still, even though it's small. Normally with this, you would have that one colored wall with some very, very thin colonnettes, which are thin columns, and a pediment over top. This is painted on what was supposed to be a jet black background to really offset those colonnettes in the faux marble look. We're still using faux marble. and the small landscape in the center. It does forego that illusionary style that was in the second period. They're not trying to make the room look like it continues on, obviously. It also wouldn't even help make it look bigger because it's black. I wouldn't want to be there. I don't like black rooms. Especially in the summer, there's no air conditioning. They're in the Mediterranean, so it's not pleasant there during the summer. No. That takes us into the fourth style. The fourth style really combines all of them. So you see the monochromatic wall with the small picture, but you also see the idea of them trying to allude to space and depth in areas, as well as fake marble. So it combines all of the three previous ones. Oftentimes people that favored the fourth style favored very crowded compositional formats and garish colors. But it does give you the idea or feeling that you're in your very own private art gallery. And this is from the House of Betty, the guys that we started with in Pompeii. But wait, there's more. Wall mosaics also adorned many of the homes in Rome and Pompeii. Usually wall mosaics are, well, usually mosaics are on the floor, just normally. But in Rome, they started applying them to ceilings and walls, such as this one of Neptune and Amphitrite. There we go, Amphitrite, that's Neptune's wife. This was located in a bathhouse on the wall, right across from a fountain, which kind of makes sense. Neptune, water, bath, fountain, yeah, it goes together. But wait, there's more decor. Eventually we'll sum this up. Private portraits were also popular for walls. This is a wall painting from the house Roman numerals. House 7. So not like a specific person's house, it's just one of the houses that they uncovered in Pompeii. Realistic portraits of people were quite popular. This would have been like a wedding portrait. Popular items to include in the portraits would be things like a stylus and paper to show that you were educated. So this is a husband and wife duo. He is holding a scroll. She is holding a stylus or pen, trying to allude to the fact that they could read and write. This was not always true. Sometimes they faked it. Fake it till you make it. Yeah. This is the equivalent, like I said earlier, of a wedding portrait today. Like you get your picture taken. I wouldn't want my picture taken with a scroll. But, okay. And the last one, still life paintings were also popular in the homes of Pompeii. Besides portraits of people and gods and goddesses and cult of Dionysus and landscapes. This is a very detailed still life. Detail like this in still lifes won't be achieved again until the Northern Renaissance when they're popularized again. But here you can see the artist tried to illustrate glass with water inside of it. You can tell it's supposed to be glass. I have seen better interpretations of glass, but not until like the Northern Renaissance once again. He also showed drop shadows, stacking, and different tools and tricks to try and create dimension, such as highlighting and shadows, which once again we won't see until the Renaissance. And once again, art historians thought they just didn't know how to do it. They didn't have these yet. Okay, that's it for home decor. We talked about the first style, second style, third style, and fourth style. Does anyone have a favorite that they'd like to share and why they like it? Why?
Because it honestly, like you're saying, it's also like your own personal art
Yeah.
gallery and it's just more homey, I guess.
There's one emperor that's in your book. I didn't include that one because I got kind of tired of wall painting. He had his entire villa decked out in the fourth style. Yeah, but he's an emperor. I think it's Octavius. No, maybe not. I don't remember. Anyways, anyone else? The first one?
It's a lot more minimal. Not
Yeah.
as minimal as the second.
I think the first one or the third one's my favorite because they're more minimal. That, and I can appreciate the fact that the first style is the first time in like art that we see someone trying to create a cheaper version of something, and we still do that today, like a precursor. So I appreciate that. Anyone else? No love for the second style. I don't know. It has its classes, the second style. It ends up leading to a fourth style. But yeah, those wall paintings are going to pop up again later because, like I said, they were used throughout the entire Roman Empire. And it wasn't just during Pompeii. It was used later on as well. So we'll see some more mosaics and wall paintings later as well. But we're moving from the Republic into the early Empire, meaning the era in which Octavian, later Augustus, crushes Mark Antony, and Mark Antony and Cleopatra end up committing suicide, and well, he really just takes over Rome and finishes up what Caesar started. In 27 BCE, he takes on the title of Augustus, or Exalted One. And really controls everything, becoming an emperor, a true emperor. And this is called the Ides of March, which just happened. Literally, when I was making this, it was the Ides of March, and I was like, oh my God. Which is the time period which leads to the Civil War, in which Octavius shuts it down and becomes emperor. But yeah, not a good time in Roman history. The following, however, is their most prosperous era, until Trajan and Hadrian, who come quite a bit later. I've seen that movie once. It was a long time ago. After Augustus takes over, he installs Pax Romana, or the period of Roman peace, which lasts for 2 centuries. Meaning Rome is chill for 2 centuries, no civil war. It's impressive for them. And art became used as a tool to shape public opinion and thoughts. Basically propaganda. Which leads us into one of those other questions from your test of like, how did Rome use art and architecture to shape people's opinions? Yeah. And we're starting off with the big one. So this is, I guess, is a Supreme Porter, like Brandon pointed out earlier. He was 32 years old already when he came into power. However, he didn't want to be shown as 32 years old, which by that point in history was old. 32 is old. Like, lifespans were short. He did live for a long time, though. Remember, he ruled for 43 years? Yeah, 40 years. So he lived for a long time. Impressive. But he didn't want to be shown as an old dude. He wanted to be shown as a useful figure. And this is the first time in Roman history in which we see a detour from appreciating the elderly, really in imagery, and instead veering towards those Greek idealized figures of the high classical period. He did change the style of art. In this sense, many people also followed suit and wanted more of an idealized version of themselves to be portrayed to the public. Is this going to last forever? No. There's other emperors that are going to come along and want to show how they're different, and they'll go back to the other style. But for a while, this sticks. He also is one of the early members of Roman history to use art to shape public opinion of himself. And this is one of the early examples of that, Augustus Suprema Porta. Or the portrait of Augustus as general. Augustus wasn't always shown as a general. He showed himself as an orator on occasion as well, as a senator and as an emperor. Just depends on which Augustus you're getting. This one's a general version. So he is in general attire. He is not fighting wars anymore. Remember, we're in Roman peace, but he's showing that he still has that ability to kick your butt if he needs to. He is holding his finger up. I think we talked about this last week, but this is like a sign or symbol or gesture of a speaker or orator. So he, being emperor, would be the main orator of the government or leader or speaker of the government because he controlled everything. So once again, showing that. It's also oftentimes today read as a commanding pose. And like Brandon mentioned earlier, he has the angel on him, or Cupid. I don't remember what you said, but Cupid. The little chubby winged baby riding a dolphin. That's because Augustus claims to be descendant of Aphrodite, whose baby is Cupid. She hooked up with Hermes, had Cupid. So he's claiming to be descendant of the gods. Now, what do you think this particular image was supposed to do to the public? Because this was shown in public setting. Power. What else? Respect. That's a big one, yeah. Any others? Wealth. Yeah, normal people wouldn't be able to do this. So he's powerful, wealthy, and he demands your respect. He's an emperor.
Control, basically.
Control, yeah. People in this time period seeing this might think, oh, this man deserves my respect. He's a conqueror, he has power. He must be intelligent since he was able to do all of this. And he's being shown as a speaker with commanding force here. So really trying to shape what the masses thought in order to prevent issues with them. Other emperors down the line are going to do this very wrong. They're going to make art and architecture that upsets the people, which ends up getting them killed. He did a pretty good job. This is Livia, his wife. Wife. We have female. Yes, and she is a wonderful example of popular styles from that period. She had a coiffured hairstyle with her hair in a bun. We're going to see another example of hair later, which is a lot different. Also shown as a young female, she is resembling which goddess? Athena.
No.
If you're wanting to look pretty,
Yeah, isn't it?
Aphrodite or Venus, yeah, she's copying like a Greek Aphrodite statue, but making it a little bit more hers, by switching it up a little bit. So yeah, another example of how this trend of idealized forms became popular during that period. I'm going to try really hard to finish up early Roman Empire and have a good stopping point for tomorrow, but we'll see. Later on, to celebrate Livia's birthday in 9 BC, Augustus dedicated the Areopagus. I do have to read that because it's kind of specific there. It was not for Livia though. It was to celebrate the long period of peace that he was able to achieve. And it also was to try and convince the public of doing a few things. First off, that he installed peace. So a lot of the scenes have to do with peaceful mythological stories and figures. So we don't have like the centaurs battling the lapis or anything like that. Another thing that it illustrates is family, which you might think is like, why is this Roman emperor illustrating family? Like there's a lot of scenes on the Areopagus with family. It's because during this period, birth rates were down. So he was trying to subliminally add messages of how kids into different artworks like the Areopagus. So on this, you would have not only those mythological scenes of peace, which had like the muses and very lighthearted notes, but scenes of like real family life, like children tugging on their parents, playing with them, things like that, versus children like standing there stiff like they weren't actually kids, which you saw with a lot of Greek stuff like the procession to Athens, Acropolis on the Parthenon's frieze. I'm thinking, I always get Parthenon and Pantheon mixed up. That's why I had to think. But yeah, Parthenon. So once again, another form of art trying to shape public opinions. This is really well preserved today, by the way. I need to add this PowerPoint up to the modules yet, but this video shows you how it's preserved today and why it's so well preserved. Some close-up scenes of the Areopagus. This is that family scene. Like I said, the children are tugging on the parents' robes as they're walking and really like interacting and acting like kids. Not fake. I mean, it's kind of fake, but yeah. Once again, full of political agenda. Art is being used for agendas now. And another piece of art produced during Augustus's reign, Pont du Gard. Pont du Gard is an aqueduct located in France. At this point in time, if you remember, Julius Caesar had already seized Gaul, which was France. So they did own France, and they needed a way to carry fresh water to different cities. So they invented plumbing and things like aqueducts to carry that fresh water. This particular aqueduct in its prime would carry 100 gallons of water per day per person from 30 miles away. And I did have to write that because I can't remember numbers. And it does work using gravity. So there is a slow decline in the structure as you go through those 30 miles. It kind of goes that way naturally. The 3 levels are not necessary for this aqueduct. The water itself really just runs along this bottom level. However, the designer or architect who created this wanted it to be aesthetically pleasing to look at. So he created these 3 layers of Roman arches or an arcade over each other, which I appreciate because I do like it. It's nice to look at. But yeah, not necessary. Once again, made possible thanks to concrete. Should just be an ad for concrete. Some more concrete. Nero's Golden House. Nero was not popular. He was one of those people that used art and architecture in a way to show off his power, not gain respect, but say, I am emperor, you will die. So much so that he actually had part of the town burned and blamed it on Christians so that he could build a house. He seized all of the burned land and built himself his golden house there. This is all speculation. He is murdered later. Well, actually, he takes his life because he knows he's going to be murdered. And the architects of the Golden Palace were Severus and Celer, in case you want to know their names. The building had many, many rooms, all decorated in the 4th style. That's the emperor that I was thinking of. It's Nero. I'm like, no, it's not Octavius because people liked him. It's the one that people didn't like. But there's a lot that people didn't like. So, decorated in the fourth style, but the most impressive room is the main hall, which is shaped in an octagon with a dome on top. So you have your octagon structure, dome, all done in concrete. This would not have been able to happen without concrete. Later on, other cultures are going to try and do this, but they'll do a square with a dome on top, which it's more structurally sound than an octagon. So this one's kind of impressive with that. Some of the things he would do with this, he would have flowers dropped down from the ceiling so that the room would be filled with fragrance when he had parties. He had a bunch of other stuff dropped down from the center. As you notice, it's open to make things look very lavish. It was all decorated in gold leaf, expensive, and had a lot of precious jewels and stones encrusted in it. They were all gone now because he died. And a lot of other expensive decorations. This was more of a dining hall area where he hosted his parties. And around it were baths and rooms and other really fancy areas. Most of this house was destroyed by a later emperor to follow who was super angry about this ever happening. For a good reason. Tomorrow, we'll start off with the Flavian, the guy that was super angry with Nero. Who, like I said, committed suicide because he was going to die. Yeah, we'll pick up there tomorrow. Remember that this week you guys have that quiz, although we did answer a good chunk of the questions on it already today.